The police sirens painted his driveway in blue and red. Neighbors peeked through curtains, whispering. And right there, on the porch he built with his own hands, stood Ethan Cole, handcuffed, silent, and stunned. The cops had found something in his bedroom, a bag of white powder neatly tucked under his mattress. Drugs. At least, that's what they said. And his mother? Oh, she was right there, too, crying loud enough for the whole street to hear. God, what happened to my son? She sobbed dramatically as the officers led him away. To everyone watching, it looked like a tragedy. A hard-working man caught in a scandal. But to her, it looked like victory, because what nobody knew was, she was the one who'd called the cops. And that house, the one Ethan worked his entire 20s to pay off, was about to be hers. Cruel? Absolutely. But you don't see monsters right away. Sometimes they wear your last name. Now, Ethan wasn't your typical small-town guy. He was calm, quiet, the kind of man who fixed other people's problems while ignoring his own. After his father passed, he took care of his mom, paid her bills, brought her groceries, even gave her half the credit when he bought that house. So how does a man like that end up in handcuffs on his own porch? How does your mother become your biggest enemy? To understand that moment, the humiliation, the betrayal, the look in her eyes, you have to rewind. Way before the sirens, before the headlines, before Ethan's world fell apart. Because this story didn't start with greed. It started with love, the kind of love that sacrifices weekends, savings, and sleep. The kind of love that believes family will never turn against you. But when love becomes debt, and debt becomes envy, family can become your worst nightmare. So buckle up. We're about to go deep into one man's fall and the unbelievable twist that made even his enemies gasp. This isn't just about betrayal, it's about redemption. And trust me, by the time you see what really happened, you'll never look at family loyalty the same way again. Welcome, story lovers. Where are you watching from? Drop your city name in the comments so we can see how far our story travels. Ethan Cole wasn't born into luxury. He came from the kind of neighborhood where dreams got traded for double shifts, and childhood ended early. His father, Frank Cole, was a construction worker, hands cracked, back broken by years of lifting more than any man should. His mother, Linda, stayed home mostly, juggling bills and bitterness with the same tired hands that once made Ethan's school lunches. Ethan was their only child. Quiet, thoughtful, a little too serious for his age. While other kids played ball in the street, Ethan fixed things, broken radios, old bikes, anything that needed patience. He didn't talk much, but when he smiled, it was real. His father used to say, "Son, the world doesn't give you anything. You build it yourself." And Ethan took that to heart. He worked hard through high school, graduated with decent grades, though not enough money to go to college. So he did what men like him always do. He started working young. Construction, plumbing, odd jobs. He saved every penny. He didn't care about fancy cars or vacations. His only dream was simple: a house. A quiet, safe place where he could build something lasting. He'd watched his parents fight over rent, over bills, over what they didn't have. He swore his own life would be different. Then when Ethan was 21, tragedy came quietly. His father collapsed one afternoon at work, a heart attack. No warnings, no second chances, just gone. That day changed everything. Linda, his mother, fell apart in ways Ethan couldn't understand. She cried for weeks, then months. But grief slowly turned into something darker. She became distant, controlling, almost paranoid about money. Ethan tried to help. He paid the bills, took over the mortgage, even worked overtime to make sure she never had to worry again. He told her, "Mom, you'll never need to lift a finger." And she didn't. But somewhere in that comfort, something in her shifted. She stopped seeing him as her son and started seeing him as her lifeline. When he brought home his first paycheck, she treated it like her victory. When he bought her groceries, she reminded him, "I carried you for 9 months, Ethan. You owe me that much." He brushed it off. After all, she'd been through so much. But the guilt began to pile up, brick by brick. Years went by. Ethan kept working, eventually landing a steady job at a local renovation firm. He was good, so good that clients began asking for him by name. He had a calm way about him. A quiet competence. Every project, every extra shift was one more step toward the dream his father planted in him. And at 29, he finally made it happen. A modest house at the edge of town. Nothing fancy, but it was his. A backyard, a small garage, a front porch that faced the sunset. He called it home. And when he brought his mother to see it, her eyes welled up. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did it," he smiled, thinking it was pride. But behind that trembling smile was envy. Linda started spending more and more time at the house. First it was visits, then weekends, then somehow, without Ethan realizing, it became permanent. She'd tell friends, "My son bought us a house," and Ethan, too kind to correct her, just nodded. He noticed small things changing. She started deciding what furniture to buy, rearranged his living room without asking, told neighbors she was the homeowner. He laughed it off at first. It was harmless, right? But beneath those harmless moments was a hunger that was growing stronger. The turning point came the year Ethan met Claire, a nurse, warm and grounded. She reminded him of everything good in life. For the first time, he started thinking about a future that didn't revolve around his mother. Linda didn't like that. Not one bit. She'd say things like, "She's using you, Ethan. You'll see." Or, "I didn't raise you to throw away your life for a woman who wants your money." The arguments got worse. Ethan tried to keep peace, but every word turned into guilt. Then came the injury. A fall at the job site. Nothing fatal, but bad enough to keep him off work for a few months. No paycheck, no savings, bills piling up. That's when his mother stepped in. She helped at first, cooked meals, handled calls, comforted him. But help came with control. Soon every decision had to go through her. Every document, every signature. One afternoon, she told him, "I think we should transfer the house temporarily under my name, just until you're back on your feet. You know, for safety." He hesitated. But it was his mother. And he'd always trusted her. He signed the papers. That single signature, born from love and exhaustion, would become the root of everything that followed. Months later, Ethan recovered, ready to go back to work. But the tone in the house had changed. His mother talked about it like it was hers now. She'd even redecorated the guest room, moved his father's old photo, and started referring to Ethan's bedroom as the spare. Still, he didn't fight. Because good sons don't fight their mothers, but deep down, something broke. He'd worked his whole life to build a peaceful home, only to realize he was slowly becoming a guest inside it. And while he thought the storm had passed, Linda was already planning something far worse. Because when love turns to ownership, betrayal isn't far behind. The breaking point never comes loud. It sneaks in quietly, through small, strange things that don't feel right until they finally explode. For Ethan, that moment began on a quiet Sunday afternoon. He'd been sitting on the porch going through his old work files when his phone buzzed. It was a voicemail from his bank. "Mr. Cole, this is regarding the recent loan inquiry connected to your property. Please confirm your identity. Loan inquiry?" He hadn't applied for any loan. A chill ran through him. He called back immediately. The banker checked the details. "Yes, sir. Your mother, Linda Cole, was listed as a co-signer on the property. We just need both parties' signatures before processing the refinance." Refinance? Ethan hadn't authorized that either. The realization hit him slowly. His mother wasn't just living in his house. She was trying to take it. When he confronted her, she smiled. Sweet, casual, like she was talking about groceries. "Oh, that. It's just to free up some cash, honey. For the both of us." "For the both of us?" Ethan asked. "Of course. You'll thank me later. You're not good with money anyway." That one sentence stung. Not because of the insult, but because she truly believed it. He walked out that night, drove aimlessly through town, trying to make sense of it. Was she really trying to take the house? Was this grief or greed? He didn't want to believe his mother could betray him. But when he returned, he found something that made denial impossible. His desk drawer, locked for years, was open. Inside, his tax papers, bank slips, and employment records were gone. In their place, a new set of documents with both their names, dated just weeks ago. That's when fear turned into suspicion. He started being more careful, changed his passwords, kept important mail at work. He even began recording calls with the bank just in case. But paranoia was exhausting, and Linda could feel him pulling away. So she tried something new: guilt. "You think I'd ever hurt you?" she'd say, wiping imaginary tears. "I'm your mother, Ethan. Everything I've done is for you." He wanted to believe her. But trust doesn't grow back once it's cracked. It just hides under politeness. Months passed. Ethan returned to work, tried to focus, tried to rebuild. Then came a small chance at hope, a new project. His boss, Mark, noticed his craftsmanship and offered him a leadership role. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady money, a shot at independence. He told his mother about it, expecting her to be proud. Instead, she frowned. "So you'll be spending more time away from home?" "Yeah, it's a big renovation job." She sighed dramatically. "After everything I did while you were hurt, you're just going to leave me here alone?" There it was again. Emotional blackmail dressed as love. Ethan felt trapped. Every move forward seemed to pull him back into her orbit. But fate has a strange way of pushing people out of their comfort zones, especially when lies start to pile up. One evening, while sorting through mail at work, he found an envelope addressed to his home, forwarded by mistake. It was from a real estate agency. Inside, an appraisal form. Estimated market value, $480,000. And the listed owner? Linda Cole. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. The next morning, he drove straight to the county records office. The clerk pulled up the property file. "Looks like it was transferred 2 years ago. Temporary guardianship. Now permanent under Linda Cole." Ethan stared at the paper. Permanent. He'd signed away everything: his home, his security, his peace, without even realizing it. Still, he didn't explode. He just stood there, silent, the paper trembling in his hands. Because sometimes, silence is what breaks you the most. He confronted his mother that evening. She was sitting in the living room watching TV, completely unbothered. "Why, Mom? Why would you do this?" She looked at him like he was the unreasonable one. "Because you were wasting your life. You were always too soft. That house needed someone responsible. Someone responsible." She'd rewritten the entire story in her head, made herself the victim and him the villain. From that day on, things changed. Ethan stopped sharing his plans, stopped trusting her with money. He even began looking for a small apartment to rent. That's when the accident happened. Police showed up one morning, responding to a tip about illegal substances in the home. They searched his room. Found a small bag of white powder neatly placed under his bed. Ethan froze. He'd never even touched drugs. He tried to explain, but his mother, his own mother, was already crying hysterically. "I warned him about those people at work," she told the officers. "He's been acting strange lately," the neighbors gathered. The scene looked exactly how she wanted it. Her, the grieving mother. Him, the fallen son. He was arrested that day, humiliated. And when he looked back at her one last time, she didn't look sad. She looked satisfied, but fate, as always, loves irony, because what Linda didn't know, what she could never have imagined, was that Ethan had quietly installed new security cameras after his documents went missing. Every corner of the house, hallway, living room, even the side window, was being recorded, day and night, and one of those cameras, the one facing his bedroom door, had caught everything. The night before the police came, she'd walked in with gloves on, a plastic bag in hand. 5 minutes later, she left, empty-handed. That footage sat quietly on a cloud drive, untouched. Waiting for the right moment. And Ethan? He said nothing. Because he knew some storms are best weathered in silence, until they turn into justice. The courtroom was small, but it felt enormous that morning. The air buzzed with whispers, the sound of papers rustling, and the heavy presence of people waiting to witness someone's downfall. Ethan Cole sat at the defendant's table, calm, almost unnervingly calm. It had been 3 weeks since his arrest. 3 weeks of silence, shame, and speculation. The local news had already had their fun. Man arrested for drug possession in his own home. His company had suspended him. His friends avoided his calls. Even Claire, his girlfriend, didn't know what to believe anymore. And through it all, Linda Cole sat behind the prosecution table, clutching tissues, the picture of a heartbroken mother. To anyone watching, she looked like a woman whose world had fallen apart because of her troubled son. But Ethan knew better. He didn't hate her. Not yet. Hate would have been too simple. What he felt was something colder, like a frost spreading through his chest. The prosecutor stood up, painting a picture of guilt, drugs, motive, carelessness. They spoke as if the story was already written. And for a while, it seemed they'd win. After all, what son would ever accuse his own mother? Then came Ethan's turn to speak. He stood slowly, his voice steady, his eyes locked on the woman who gave him life and took everything else. "Your Honor," he began, "I didn't come here to defend myself. I came here to tell the truth." The courtroom hushed. Even Linda looked up, pretending to dab tears, but her hand froze when Ethan reached into a folder. 3 months ago, I started noticing things missing from my room, papers, keys, even cash. I didn't think much of it. But after the property transfer, I got suspicious. So I installed a few security cameras in the house. For peace of mind. He paused. The prosecutor tried to interrupt. "Mr. Cole, this isn't—" But the judge gestured for him to continue. Ethan turned to the screen beside him. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit this footage into evidence." The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the video began to play. It was grainy but clear. A woman, Linda Cole, entered the room late at night, gloved, holding a small plastic bag. She lifted the mattress, slid it underneath, and quietly left. Gasps filled the room. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Linda's face drained of color. Ethan didn't look away. He didn't smirk, didn't gloat. He just stood there calm and broken. "That's my bedroom," he said quietly. "And that's my mother." The judge leaned forward, eyebrows furrowed. The prosecutor looked stunned. Even the bailiff seemed to shift uncomfortably. Linda tried to speak, her voice shaking. That's not what it looks like." But Ethan continued, cutting through the noise like glass through silk. "For 30 years, I believed love meant sacrifice. I believed family meant trust. But sometimes the people you die for are the ones holding the knife." Silence. Just the soft hum of the projector. Ethan turned off the video and looked straight at her. "You didn't just take my house, Mom. You took my name, my peace, my father's memory." The courtroom was still. Linda's lawyer tried to regain control, mumbling something about misunderstanding and context, but it was useless. The truth was already out. The judge leaned back, speaking slowly. "This court will review the evidence, but from what I've seen, it appears the defendant was, in fact, framed." Ethan exhaled, a breath he'd been holding for months. And in that moment, the weight of everything, his humiliation, his silence, his years of loyalty, crashed down. Linda broke down crying, begging, whispering, "Ethan, I'm your mother. You can't do this to me." But he didn't respond, because this wasn't revenge. It was release. The officers approached, this time not for him, but for her. As they escorted Linda out, the crowd parted. Neighbors who once whispered now stared in disbelief. And for the first time, Ethan didn't feel shame. He felt clarity. He realized something powerful. Truth doesn't need noise. It just needs time. He walked out of that courtroom into the crisp morning air, the sun cutting through the clouds like mercy itself. Reporters called after him. Cameras flashed. But he didn't stop. He didn't need to explain anymore, because for once the truth spoke louder than his pain. And somewhere behind him, in that same courtroom where she'd pretended to cry, his mother sat alone, face buried in her hands, realizing that the house she stole had cost her everything else. Dear audience, if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to give it a like. It really helps. Months passed since that day in court. The tabloids had moved on. The reporters stopped calling. But for Ethan Cole, silence had never sounded so good. He no longer lived in the same house. He sold it the moment the legal dust settled. It wasn't about revenge or bitterness. It was about closing a chapter that had already burned itself to ashes. Instead, he bought a small cottage by the coast, quiet enough that he could hear his own thoughts again. The mornings there were gentle. He'd wake before sunrise, brew his coffee, and watch the ocean breathe, waves collapsing against the shore like forgiveness, trying to find its rhythm. It was peaceful, almost unreal after months of chaos, but healing wasn't instant. There were nights when the memories still cut deep, his mother's eyes full of deceit, the sound of the judge's gavel, the whispers in the courtroom. He couldn't unsee them, but he could choose to live beyond them. So that's what he did. He returned to work, this time not as an employee, but as a consultant. His reputation, once shredded by scandal, was now rebuilt stronger than ever. People respected him not just for surviving the false accusations, but for how he carried himself through them, with dignity, not rage. Ironically, the story that once nearly destroyed him became the reason people trusted him more. Companies sought his advice on integrity and crisis management. Universities invited him to speak about resilience, ethics, and the power of truth. And each time he stepped onto a stage, he began the same way. I was betrayed by the one person I trusted most. But it didn't end me, it refined me. He never named his mother. He didn't need to. This story wasn't about vengeance anymore, it was about transformation. Meanwhile, Linda Cole's life had become a shadow of what it once was. Her friends stopped calling. Her lawyer dropped her case after the fraud investigations began, and the house she fought so hard to take, it now stood empty, silent, its windows staring out like hollow eyes. Ethan visited it one last time before selling it. The air inside still carried traces of old memories, birthday balloons, family dinners, his father's laughter. He placed a photo on the counter, one of him as a boy sitting on his mother's lap, both smiling. Then he whispered, "I forgive you," and walked away. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant freedom, from bitterness, from pain, from the endless replay of betrayal. Over time, he found himself mentoring young people who'd been falsely accused or disowned by their families. He helped them rebuild, not just their records, but their confidence. Because he knew firsthand how fragile a soul can become when the world turns against you, he launched a foundation, The Second Truth, project dedicated to helping victims of false accusations find legal and emotional support. The same newspapers that once printed his mugshot now ran headlines like, "Ethan Cole turns betrayal into a beacon of hope." But Ethan never did it for recognition. He did it because pain, when repurposed, becomes purpose. As for his mother, she eventually reached out. A short letter, handwritten. Apologies scattered across every line like raindrops trying to wash away fire. He read it once, then folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. He didn't reply. Some closures don't need words. They need peace. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, Ethan sat on his porch, a warm breeze brushing against his face. The ocean shimmered gold and endless. For the first time in years, he smiled, not because life was perfect, but because it was honest. He thought of his father, who had always said, "Truth may be slow, but it never loses." Now, he finally understood. He lifted his coffee mug, whispering softly, "To truth, to healing, to starting over." The camera would fade there, the ocean glowing in the last light, Ethan's face calm, the past behind him. And maybe somewhere, miles away, his mother sat by a window, reading his foundation's name in the news, realizing the irony. She tried to destroy his life. And instead, she gave it meaning. Dear audience, if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because sometimes, the truth we fear the most is the one that sets us free.